Buckle your seatbelts, everyone. Good, bad, or bullshit. Episode 248 begins in 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to the Good, Bad, or Bullshit podcast. My name is Bo Schwartz, and joining me today, as they do each time we sit together, that one over there is Michael Hodgins. Hello, Mike.
Hello.
And the other one over there is Crofton Steers. Good day to you, sir.
Hey, good day. I have no idea what directions you're pointing in, but I appreciate it.
Use your imagination, right? It's powerful. I bet you everyone listening right now is visualizing this conversation in a way that's not accurate to what's actually happening.
It is funny how, before the COVID thing, podcasters who might have a bunch of money, like, for example, like Joe Rogan or something like that, they have a studio, the guest comes in the studio, and then you seem like, we were like, Mickey Mouse because you're just like doing it on Skype or whatever. But look at us now. Now it's the COVID. It's like, hey, this is old hat. We know how to use some Zoom or equivalent.
We're forward thinking is what you're saying.
Yeah, like we were both like, a pandemic's coming. I've been living in a bunker for 10 years before this came. It's I knew it was coming.
Yeah, we've been Zooming for like a decade, bitch.
Too lazy to go to each other's houses.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I want to go to your houses, but I worry of the COVID.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and if I like the idea of like doing, sitting in a room and being like, hey, got your recording gear, and it's like it's a different kind of. But I mean, honestly, Zoom is pretty good. But I will say, like, I am very resistant to Zoom stuff for my work because it's like my work the other day had this like. I can't I can't get into this stuff where it was like they wanted to do some sort of, in the office people do social things, like it's like, oh, look, it's summer, let's go, everyone will go and eat in the park and it'll be like a picnic, whatever. So they're trying to do this on Zoom, and I'm just like, give it up, people, we're not together. And it was like this beach theme. People were like going to be like, okay, it's summer, let's do like a beach themed Zoom call, like beach themed Zoom call. What am I gonna do? Like get in my bathing suit or like put a background of the fucking beach and sit at my computer and be like, hey everyone, are we at the beach? I'm like,
this is an awesome moment, Mike. You don't need to finish, because what you're experiencing is what I was talking about like 5 to 7 years ago about Twitch culture, right? Like people getting on cameras and eating food and playing video games. It has permeated the mainstream due to COVID. Like, your grandmother wants to dress up in a beach outfit and have a virtual call for people for entertainment in this way. Like that's
and like, I guess I stand by, because I didn't like it then.
Yes,
and I do not like it now.
Exactly. Like you were, and there, Crofton's changed his background to an animated beach.
Yes.
But like you were seeing the disintegration of. Like you were standing on the outside of culture then, and you continue to remain on the outside of mainstream culture.
That's my comfort zone, the outside of culture.
It's
so
hilarious.
Either way, I did not attend the thing, and people were like, and sometimes I'm like, look, I have good work relationships with people, and I like a lot of my work colleagues, I really do. But like oftentimes I want to say, it's like, I wish you guys say this at a meeting with 20 people. It's like, everyone here, I like everyone, get on, but just let's get one thing straight. If they stop paying me, I won't see any of you ever again. Like that's what's gonna happen. It's not because I don't like you, it's just because like I have my own life, and I'm like, but I just find it sometimes people bending over to backwards and be like, let's do this social stuff, and I'm like, it's a job. Like it's the Chris Rock bit of like, oh, why do you want to work?
You can see how ridiculous
at the yogurt stand. Like I need fucking money. Like I don't care about this stuff. I don't care about anything. It's like I need the job because I need money. If I didn't need money, I would not do the job. And I just feel like that's just honest. But everyone is like, no, I really care about this thing that I'm doing, and I feel like that's a bonus if you find meaning in your work. A lot of people do, but most people, if you stop paying them, probably wouldn't go do the thing that
they probably all know that, and they're just indulging each other's need for like dopamine or something like that.
Look, they're all really nice people, and I'm not saying a bad thing about them. I am the one who's like the curmudgeon who I'm like, look, I'd rather just hang out with my own family if I'm gonna pretend to be at the beach. I'll go to the beach.
We didn't see you at the beach, the office beach party the other day.
I was out swimming in the lake.
Was a good time.
How's the weather over there, Crofton?
Yeah, we played volleyball. We played with a virtual ball that we would pretend to throw to each other's
Oh my
screens.
god! I think that. How much you want to bet that has actually happened
Yes.
somewhere?
It has for
Where
sure.
they actually
happened.
had the party, but then did a virtual beach game as a team building
I
exercise.
bet more it has been it's been used in a look. I'm passing you the ball. Like the ball is in your court. It's a team building exercise. So here is the ball, Bo. I'm throwing it down to you.
I got show stuff to do. I can't catch it.
Oh no,
Oh, no.
You dropped the ball, Bo. You dropped it.
A Zoom failure.
Oh,
I'll say
And then all of a sudden, if I fucked up the game, so on their business Slack or instant messaging, when I ask people questions, they're slow to respond, and usually they're much faster. And they know it's because I screwed up at the beach party at the office.
He's not a team player.
One thing I will say is that, I think the last time we recorded this show, we joked about the fact that I had just begun vacation and now we were going to do the next one, and it was going to be at the end of my vacation. Well, this is the end of my vacation. It's pretty much I got the weekend and then I'm back at work.
Aww.
And this is the first, I do another podcast, but we don't do video and stuff. This is the first Zoom call that I've done in 3 weeks, and I gotta say, I don't miss them. No offense to you guys, but I'm gonna be back doing 3 or 4 of these every day per week, and I'm like, oh god.
I was on a 3-hour conference call today.
It's brutal. So just to pivot to something else that's vaguely related to this stuff, but working remotely and all that. So Carlson has this background of this lovely tropical paradise. He's maybe pretending to be in, but my brother-in-law and his wife have applied to the Barbados, who have this 1-year work.
Right, I read about that.
Yeah, they applied and they got accepted, and they're just trying to work out logistics with their with their bosses. Now, my brother-in-law, he works for a private company, and they're like, good on you. This is great. Yeah, go for it. Whatever, you're still doing your work. So he's all good. And his wife works for one of the governmental levels, and the government's a little bit more well, do we really want our government people working overseas for the government, or whatever? So she's getting some resistance, but they're going to try to work it out. But I mean, that is a pretty cool opportunity. And it's always before any of this happened, I remember when I worked, especially in kind of organizational development and internal kind of communication type stuff, a lot of the forward thinking stuff is why do people need to work in an office? You can work from anywhere, and give people more maybe autonomy about when they work. And it's with this connected world, so they might be in Barbados for a year doing their usual crap and then just getting to experience new countries. I think it's pretty cool if it works out for them.
Yeah, I know. I'm interested to see if this was going to lead to bigger shifts for everybody, and that we're all going to do work wherever we want if our jobs are on board with it. And for us office denizens, I feel like there's no reason why that can't happen. Yeah. And so and I know in our area right now the conversation has been limited to, well, I'm looking at a house, instead of looking downtown, I'm going to look in the suburbs, or I'm going to look in the countryside because I don't need to be close to the office anymore. But I think that soon enough that conversation may expand once people are more comfortable with the world, because right now our country is one of the safer countries in terms of COVID controls and all that to be in. And travel is kicking up again. If we're now in a spot where we can work from home all the time, people might be looking at entire countries in which that they would be able to work from, even if it's just for your brother-in-law, a temporary period of time. My mom's from New Zealand. I would love to uproot and maybe live in New Zealand for a year and then come back. But yeah, cool opportunities.
Oh, Mike's muted.
Yeah, you should go to New Zealand. That sounds pretty good. It's funny because the idea to me does not appeal to me, because I love seasons right now. Even at the end of summer, we had a couple cool days. It's like, oh, fall. Oh, I love fall. I'm always ready for the next season. I love the changing seasons. So I'm like, no, I couldn't take living in a tropical paradise. It sounds ridiculous, but I'm like, where's the snow? I just need that stuff. But anyways,
Well, it does sound ridiculous. So shall we move ahead with the main event, the meat and
We
potatoes of the show?
Today, I think the bird is delivering to you, Mike.
all right, I got my window open here.
Yeah, I can see him hovering above. He's flapping his wings. Let's see.
And today it's a beautiful indigo bunting. Thank you, Mr. Bunting. You have a beautiful plumage, may I say. All right, let me
Did
take
you
a look
name
at
the
it.
bird Mr. Bunting?
He's an indigo bunting. Look it up. They're beautiful.
All right, I like this. But I
Uh,
kind of want it to be like on our shoulders now, in our logo. Anyways,
Yeah.
sorry.
well,
Go ahead.
dreams can come true, Bo. Okay, the topic today is ancestry.
Ancestry?
I
know what you said.
I feel
I'm
like you just had a Freudian slip there.
No, I'm just making jokes. That was on purpose.
Ancestry. There probably is some ancestry in some people's ancestry. I'm talking to you, Queen.
Well, you can talk to me. There's definitely some in mine.
Ancestry, you think so?
Oh, I know so. It's a fact. We have a family book with it documented.
With the brothers and
proudly.
sisters being like, well, there ain't no one else around, so what are you
I
gonna
need
do?
to get a hold of a copy. I don't know because I was too young when I saw the book to really care about it. Anyways, maybe we should
funny
wait a
those-
bit before delving into the incest part. But I know for sure that my grandparents were third cousins, and I was told,
Third
that's-
cousins is getting kind of far.
But
anyways.
that's the best of the scenarios.
Yeah.
So that's the best from that. And we've been here 6 generations. So
No. I mean, that's not so bad. Some people would be like, third cousins, that's gross. That's not so bad. I mean, some of the
bad.
some
for
of the
that
royal
time.
family people was like, you're a sister because you got to keep the bloodline
Well,
pure. That stuff has happened.
So that's 3 generations. That's 4 generations in. So generation 1, 2, 3 was closer, but I just don't know exactly what because I have to get.
So Bo, okay, so we've established Bo, product of incest. We don't know where his
Yes.
ancestry is beyond that. Just that he's inbred. And Crofton, what about? You're the one who said it.
Yeah, but see, I said it in a way where I was talking about. You're like, anyways, both said he's inbred. And
Yeah, let's move on. We don't need to know anything more.
let's
about
move
him.
on.
It's a very shallow gene pool there. That's all we knew. Ancestry. Use your
So
ancestry.
I just don't understand the topic in the sense that
let me I guess,
Yeah.
guess frame it a little bit. You'll have people who will say, like, oh, I am Irish of Irish descent, or half my family is
born in
British,
Korea.
the other half is from I don't know, India. My dad's Indian or whatever. Or some people will be like, they just trace it right back. Like I can, I'm French and can go all the way back to Charlemagne. It's all French all the way back. Ancestry, where you kind of, see your kind of like long history roots. And so I will just say like because I mean, I think going back far enough, nobody kind of probably really knows. I mean, you can. So like my mom is from the Ukraine, and so she would always say to me like, you're Ukrainian. And of course I don't speak Ukrainian and I don't know anything with the Ukraine, but whatever. My mom's from there and my grandfather had a big thick accent, he was Ukrainian. And so whatever, Eastern Europe.
Mhm.
And then my dad is more of the Irish. He's an Irish person, and I think pretty much everyone's there. There might be a little bit of like other British Isles mixed in that side of the family. So it's like Eastern Europe and then like the British sort of Isles. That's my ancestry as told to me by my parents, right? Of
Your ancestors.
where your ancestors came from. I mean, keep in mind, this topic is this concept a good thing, a bad thing, or a bullshit thing?
So you mean
No,
like the
just-
value of it?
Well,
Because you have ancestors either way.
Yeah, it's like
controversial.
everyone
yeah,
has
it's like a
ancestors.
fact.
Well,
Yeah.
it is, but I mean, okay, a couple things that I was thinking of with this. I mean, well, no, before I get into some of the things I was going to bring up, let's do a
Okay.
round table. So I'm a Ukrainian and Irish. So basically, like whitey from kind of the bookends of Europe. You guys are both whiteys too, so you're also from there. Well, it's true. Well, it's true.
You saying whitey is making the conversation more accessible for me. So that's good. I'm just joking. Yeah, so dad's see we're Canadian on my dad's side in the sense that
but no, you're not. You're not a First Nations person.
No, but we've been here 6 generations.
So what? So is my dad. That doesn't mean shit.
Okay, so we're
It's
playing
not
the
true.
game
Your ancestry is not from this country. Those are people.
On my father's side, I am mostly German and a quarter Irish, total 1/8 or something like that. If you give that kind of thing value, I know there's Irish in me and German. But Germans that have been in Canada for 200 years before Canada was even a country. So I figure if your family's in the country at year 1, you're not an ancestor of anything, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. You're not from this land either. I mean, look, a lot of us are immigrants in the new world.
I'm not from this planet originally, going as far back as you want, right? Like,
yeah, we are.
No, it was Starlight long before I was in existence.
Well, whatever.
So, we can frame Starlight. It however you want.
Yeah, okay, sure. If you got to get that granular.
But sorry. Crofton will get to you eventually. The other side is Hungarian, 100%. Both my 100%. Ancestors and
purebred.
And there's a rumor actually that in the year 1200, or in the 1200s, that my line is from an illegitimate, bastard kid from King, I think Stepan, that was the ruler at that time. Oh. So there's also a little myth in the family about royal blood.
Royal blood. Much diluted. Now I want to hear Crofton's because it'll be a.
So,
I'll tell you what it is: the British Isles.
But it's your you're cherry picking what you want to be considered ancestry.
Yeah, well, ancestry.
No, because you can have ancestors that, like as Bose points out, like if he has 5 generations back Canadian ancestry, it's like you're choosing to go back further to the whatever. Like I don't know where my original point of ancestry is, and nor do I care that much. And this is one of those things that I associate, the detailed family trees with being like, hey, and maybe this is unfair, but like a sort of an older person's pursuit. Like you're retired, you're like, I'm going to do my family tree. Let's go to ancestry.com and go back and dig it out. I know almost embarrassingly little about my family history beyond my grandparents. And all I can say for certain is that the Steer side of my family is from Canada and has been for the past few generations and comes from Irish British background. And my mom is born and raised in Oamaru in the South Island of New Zealand and is multi-generational from New Zealand, but of course would trace her background to England.
Like she's not Maori.
No, she's not. But if I did a family tree, it would not surprise me if there was some Maori in my family.
Right.
Just like if I did a family tree, it would not surprise me if there's Canadian First Nation in my family. I don't know because I have not done that, nor do I have any like deeper knowledge of it, and in fact have had very very limited interest beyond say like my grandparents, which I don't know like if my interest will increase as my age goes on, like I've seen others, but we will see. Like Bo seems to know a lot. Like he's like going back talking about kings and this and that, and I'm like, I don't know shit. I could be a direct descendant of the king of King of England or whatever from the and I would not know.
In my greatest flights of fancy on both, because on my dad's side, the rumor is also that the Schwartz ancestor was a land baron or a person of power that to flee persecution, but criminal punishment by coming to the New World. So in my deepest fantasies, like flights of fantasy, not that I want this to happen, but just I imagine, people from Hungary coming to me and being like, we're reestablishing a royal family and we determined you're the blood heir. You have to come rule Hungary now. And I'm like, all right, let's see what's up over here. And like, I imagine what that would be like. And same with Germany. They're just like, you must come back and become the Gesundheit minister.
I think that's literally the plot to the John Goodman film King Ralph.
Oh, could be. I haven't seen it. But it's
Yeah.
one of those flights of fancy you indulge sometimes, and because I have those legends in my family, but I'm like, the real answer is it doesn't matter that much, you know.
Well,
that's why I'm just like, I'm pretty much like, from my dad's side, we're Canadian. My grandparents were immigrants from the Hungarian, from the Russian occupation of Hungary.
yeah, it's funny in some ways. Your ancestry and mine is somewhat similar. It's like the Irish side here. It's 5-ish generation. I think also pre Confederation in Canada, on the Irish side, and then the other side, it's like they came in like the 40s after the Germans, like my grandparents met in like a POW camp in Germany, from the Germans, you know, and then they came to Canada. So whatever, that's their story. But that's not really what we're talking. Like when I think of ancestry, you know how like a lot of people like to trace, like when Bo was like in the 1200s. This is kind of my opinion, but you could trace your blood back to this bastard, you know, of the royal blood or whatever, you know, and that's interesting. But I'd done this math before. I just did it quickly while we were chatting too. So it's like, you know, you have 2 parents, right, and then 4 grandparents, and then 8 great parents. It's like this is it's exponential, right? So if you go back 20 generations, you are directly descendant from 1 million people. From 1 million people, 20 generations. Saying a generation about 30 years, that's 600 years ago. So 600 years ago is not that long. It was basically what Bo. It's more recent than what Bo just said. You're directly descended from 1 million people from 600 years ago. So, you know, this is part of, like, you know, I obviously had a perspective on ancestry when I brought up this topic, but that is, so first of all, those 1 million people are not all, you realize very quickly that you're not directly descended from any one person. After a few generations, it's like this network mesh of people who, people in the random street, you share all kinds of ancestors with them, because it's just, you know, and you keep going back further, that number gets larger, and all of a sudden you're directly descended from every person that's ever lived, kind of.
Well, Genghis Khan for sure.
Well, Genghis Khan. I mean, like, so, you know, like, I have ancestry from Eastern Europe, and I think it's like a lot of people in Eastern Europe can trace direct ancestry to Genghis Khan, as can a lot of people in Asia and Eurasia and like all these places, because it's just like, what does that mean? You know, and people say that about, I made the joke about Charlemagne, you know, from France. Be like, I'm directly descended from Charlemagne. It's like, yeah, there's always all the rest of Europe. Basically, it's just like, it's just too many people, you know. But then people put stock in it, you know, that ancestry is kind of important, and it's like, maybe it's important in terms of your family story, like, but I don't think of that as ancestry. Like when people say ancestors, like, do you mean your grandparents and their parents? You know, I'm like, I think of like way back.
Well, so the thing about the ancestry bit is, I think that these last couple of 100 years have really like drawn ideological and national lines in the sand amongst people where that kind of shit really matters. Like, it doesn't matter that I'm a Hungarian descended so much from someone 1,000 years ago, but it matters, you know, the role they played in the war and what their story was coming from it, why it's important. Actually, on my Hungarian side, there was a Hungarian community over here, and we were distant from them because we didn't want to associate with them, because there was a lot of conflict due to communism in Hungary and stuff like that. And, you know, they wanted distance from it. They didn't want to be a part of the community that much, you know, so like, it sort of mattered that you were Hungarian. Like, the ancestry was relevant as a cultural thing here to survive here, and I think it like stems from the world wars, right? Like, the fact that we're German, but like, I've always got to say, like, but we weren't in the world wars, like, don't associate me with that, you know. Like, but my dad really instilled, like, no, you're a German, remember that you're German. Like, there's just this tradition of passing on these values that we bring here that you try to preserve. Like, we haven't immigrated anywhere. You'd have to imagine if you went to go live in Laos, you know, and maybe you were immigrating, you left because Donald Trump took over the whole continent and just made it so unbearable and war and turmoil that you're just like, fuck it, I'm gonna live somewhere else. Well, you're still gonna maybe preserve a piece of the Canada you loved, even though, let's say, everything about Canada was just demolished because of the Civil War and fighting that could happen here. Then you'd like bring a piece of that with you. And I think like that happened a lot to people coming to the New World, and that's why, like, for us especially in like North America, we're so obsessed about where we come from, because everyone came from somewhere different, and a lot of it was hard. But you're right, it doesn't probably matter that much, you know.
Well, and also it's sort of like, if you know, it is interesting because it's a double-edged thing. So a lot of people like to preserve, you know, these traditions or this history that they deem sort of important, but it also preserves like the bullshit of like of the conflicts that maybe people ran from or escaped from. Like my dad would always be like, "Oh, you're Irish," and he never really explained to me the thing, the specifics about that. And only when I was older, even recently, where people like, you know, like I have an Irish last name. And it's like, you know, it's like St. Patty's Day. Oh, it's like, oh, Irish. And I'm like, and then I'm like, no, I'm not that kind of Irish. I'm the other kind, the kind that those Irish that don't like, and vice versa. But I don't give a fuck. Like, I mean, so it's sort of like to be like, oh, what kind of, you're a Protestant Irish? Oh, the Catholic Irish. Like, they're still fighting about that stuff. And I'm like, why would you bring that over to anywhere? But people do, you know. And then it's interesting. So I think of this as like, like from my own point of view, and I think of my, like, if anyone asks me, really, like I shared what my parents told me my ancestry was. My mom was like, oh, you're Ukrainian. My dad's like, you're Irish. If you ask me, though, I'm just like, I would just say I'm Canadian, even though Canadian is one of these like murky,
well, you mean
identities.
It more as you have a membership, not that you're, you know, some
yeah. I mean, like,
yeah.
I am not a First Nations person. I can't claim long-term ancestry from this physical place because but like everybody, I had no choice in where I was born or what came slightly before, but I have no relations to those things. And I realized kind of as I get older, I'm like, and I don't want to, in the sense that like my grandfather's story is interesting, but it's not my story, right? But some people will get caught up in the ancestry and be like, no, it is your story, or parts how you got there. And like, sure, but your own lived experience is your own. And it's like, I think you can get hung up on the importance of ancestry, and I just feel like it's these increased sort of divisions, you know. And you know, because it's like you trace this thing back for you know, right now we're in the midst of it, you know, in the States, of like, you know, real divisions along racial lines, you know. And with ancestry stuff, like, look, we trace it all back far enough. We're all from Africa, you know, that's where human beings are from, everyone. So we're all related. And when you look at that, just that simple math of like, go back 20 generations, there's a million people that are your direct ancestors. It's like we're all kind of related. And holding on to, I just worry, like, you know, holding on to these threads of ancestry from certain specific places. And also because you don't know, like, say, well, you say you're Hungarian, you know, and going to 1200, think of all those people. You're back to a million people you're directly descended from. It's like, yeah, a lot of them always kind of lived in Hungary. Who knows who else some of those people were or where they came from? You're probably like, there was probably some Genghis Khan there, you know, where they came in, because it's from that part of Europe too. It's like, you just can't know. And so I just find it like I mean, I'm kind of, I guess, leaning, you can see where I'm leaning towards what I think about ancestry.
Yeah, why? Well, we want to let Crofton have a bit of a chance. So,
well, I'd just say that, like, and you know, this is, Mike touched on a lot of similar thoughts to the ones that I have, but when he's talking about like how his personal story and his grandparents' story, like your story, Mike, when you're talking about it, when their story is one of like, you know, overcoming hardship and all this, and they want that to be remembered, and they want that to be passed on, and they want that story to continue. But I respect that. But looking at, say, my immediate parents, neither one of my parents had to overcome that, you know, any sort of level of hardship. And on my grandparents' side, you know, not really either. And so because of that, like my for me, Ancestry and your story, the story of you and in your family, is part of sort of the larger indoctrination that we do to our, to our children, and it be it about, your favorite sports team and getting them to love it right off, or your religion, being like, we're Roman Catholic, now you are too, we're Irish, now you are too. So for me, what I thought was really interesting about the way that I was brought up, and it was not something that I ever really considered at the time. So both my parents obviously went to church when they were kids, because just one generation removed from us, like you didn't have really any say in it. But both of them were sort of part of the hippie movement, and by the time they had kids, they decided that organized religion wasn't going to be a part of their lives. And it wasn't in the same way that it's not part of my kids' lives right now. I don't tell them about it. Like, they don't know that it exists, really. My daughter is asked about churches at certain points, and I try to explain things a little bit, just in the same way that I'm sure that I asked my parents about churches and that. And so, like, for me, Ancestry falls into that sort of background as well. I don't know anything about my ancestry because my parents didn't volunteer or shove that information down my throat. They didn't say like, oh yeah, you're from England and we're in service of the Queen and this and that. Like, that never came up. The closest would be my current identity, which, like Mike, is Canadian. So the pointing to, Canadian symbols and stuff as things that we value, or Canadian values as things that we value. And so because of that, like, I have really not given much thought to both my personal ancestry and ancestry in general. But when I think about, like, I tie this in with ethnic identity, and again, as somebody who's a white person, very privileged and all that, haven't had to deal with much adversity, and that's my whole story. Have not had to deal with any adversity stemming from my heritage or my ancestry or anything like that. So therefore, I'm not a minority person. Therefore, I'm not champion my own ancestry, because I haven't had these sort of traumatic experiences that give me tremendous pride in it and that. And I would never begrudge somebody, be it from First Nation origin, Black people in the States, or like even in Mike's story about his grandparents overcoming the imprisonment camps for the Nazis. Like, these are important things, and it's worth remembering these things and celebrating these things. So I find myself torn between on a personal level, I don't see the tremendous value in it. I don't have interest in it, and it seems like part of like the indoctrination process of your youth. And like, instead of letting them start with a fresh slate, you're kind of like setting them on a path. You're picking their tribes already, the tribes they dislike, all of that sort of stuff. So that I don't like. But then on the other hand, I do like all the stuff related to, celebrating success and shared traumas and building from that and ensuring that we all have equality. And that's built over recognizing sort of the trials and tribulations of your ancestors. So I don't really know where I fall on this yet.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, because it does go many different ways. Like, there are certainly positives, and people draw a lot of strength from the idea of ancestry, or where your roots are, and things like, you hear this term. We're all of a privileged class because we are white men. There's no doubt that our lives are been easier just because of that. So that's for sure true. And you hear about things like intergenerational trauma, like those are real things, and that some people have to deal with. And I don't want to say that they're. I'm not like in sort of being not interested in ancestry, saying that those things aren't important. They are, but in some ways, like in a different way than ancestry is important. Like, the specific like line in which you follow doesn't mean you don't have to think about traumas of the past that are kind of relevant to all of society. Like, if you hear, like, when I hear stories about in Canada about, say, First Nations and residential schools, it's a clear injustice. Right now, I have no ancestral link to any of that trauma, but it's and I have not suffered any intergenerational trauma because of it. but I recognize that it is a scar on the fabric of the country in which I live, and that it affects people's lives now and then. Like, it's still relevant, even if you don't have that direct ancestry. So I'm not trying to downplay these things. Now, some people can claim this is my lived experience or my parents, and it affected me, and those are real things. But that's kind of a little bit more on the like the order of like, oh yeah, my grandfather and grandmother met in a POW camp. It's like, okay, that's a story. It's a story that's pretty close back, though it didn't affect me. But when when you start really drawing these lines far back, I think it's like the further back you go, the murkier it gets. Is I guess what with that math question, where I put those numbers out, because it's pretty interesting how quickly it gets to a large number. And I feel like it's always kind of relevant when you're thinking about your own family, and is useful in terms of just like, when you go to the doctor and they're like, oh, what's your medical history? You want to know what some of those people who are your grandparents had cancer or whatever, like those pretty. But it doesn't matter what your great grandparents' medical histories were. Some random person on the street you might have as much in common with in terms of medical history as a great grandfather. So it's kind of like where you draw these lines and how far you go back. But
so why does it burn your ass so much?
Well, I don't know if I came off that it was
no, because I'm just like,
I'm like a huge hate.
I'm like pretty much on board with what you're saying, But it seems like, we should put too much. Are we putting too much stock in it, or is it?
No. I mean, I brought it forth as a topic. Like, I mean, honestly, don't think about ancestry much at all.
No, I think it's a good topic.
It occurred to me one time that I thought it would be an interesting topic because, especially with the 23andMe, so people are doing these like genetic tests, and they'll get these results back. Yeah, and in some ways, maybe this also sparked part of it, because this is doubly I shouldn't say bullshit, but people get these tests back, and then they'll say, oh, I have Scandinavian and like 4% Scandinavian, and it's like, what the fuck does that mean? It's like, does that culture now mean something to you? Like, no, it doesn't. And I mean, I think about that again.
Means 4% of you would be led in the country by Donald Trump.
Well, if you want to go to the States. But it's so interesting if you think about, like, if we live in a country like this, be like, oh, you're Canadian, and then we go get a 23andMe, and then say Crofton finds out that, Bo finds out he's directly descended from Genghis Khan and a Hungarian prince, and Crofton finds out that he has Maori and First Nations of various minute percentages, and I find out that like, I don't know, whatever, it's Bo and I are like 1500th brothers because we were both descended from Genghis Khan. 100th brothers. I mean, we're like, we're related. Link. We're related. 23andMe.
We've got the Irish link.
Yeah, the Irish and the whatever. But it's just like, it doesn't mean. So if you get that thing back and say, oh, you have DNA that links you to this part of the world from 1500 years ago, it's like it's so interesting that people might be like, oh, I never knew that, and now that's interesting and intriguing to me. But it has so little relation. Like, if you grew up in Canada, like my mom, and I guess I did have, opposite to Crofton, parents who were like, my mom would be like, you're Ukrainian. And she would say that. And I'm like, that means nothing to me. And my dad also would say, you're Irish. And specifically, you're Protestant. I'm like, and I remember being a little kid and being like, I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. But I do remember I would tell kids in the schoolyard that I'm Protestant. What are you? And it's sort of interesting.
And with a little attitude of like, probably something shitty.
Well, actually, it just reminds me of
kids are. You're like, I'm something. Are you something? You're nothing. You loser.
Well, yeah. It's funny because I basically said the other. I visited my in-laws in Toronto not that long ago, and my little nephew is he's 5. I think he was 5 at the time. And I hadn't seen him since the summer, so it'd been like 6 months since I seen him. I walked in the door. I was like, "Oh, hey, Cohen." He walks up. He's like, "Are you Christian or a Jew?" And that's what he said. That was the first thing he said. And I was like, "Oh, I'm an atheist." And then he's like, "What's that?" I'm like, and then something happened.
And you were like Jew. It's a Jew.
No. But I'm like, we're literally
close enough.
We're walking in with bags in our hands. He's like, "Are you a Christian or a Jew?" I'm like, "I'm an atheist." And then it's like something happened, and I never told him, like, there's no God, kid. But yeah, it's sort of funny because I'm like, I asked later his parents, I'm like, where did he get this from? And they're like, oh, one of his friends at school, they're Jewish, and
that's his go-to question.
And they're very interested in that, and I guess they tell their kids a lot. And again, it's of real significant importance for some people, these cultural lineages. But I just always worry about anything
think-
that leads to divisions. I
I
guess is
think
what
that's
that's what burns me. I'm
I
like,
think
divisions.
it's an important part of oral tradition. Like, you tell the stories to your kids of where you come from on some level. It's inescapable. You're gonna raise your kids and never tell them anything about the generations that came before. Like, it's hard
Okay.
to ignore too.
Here's a question for you guys. If you found out tomorrow, like in Mike's 37andMe test or whatever that he's doing, like if you find out tomorrow that, say, you're, I don't know, Adolf Hitler's great grandson.
He's out there. I actually looked him up the other day.
Yeah, I don't even want to know why that is, but anyway, just
I was curious. The thought
Very
occurred to me.
interesting
And
history there.
no, I'm just
Yeah.
like, Hitler probably has kids, does he?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm thinking of
I don't
something
think he
else.
did have kids, but
But
who knows?
but look. Bottom line is, I picked him because he's
Sure, the worst person
clearly
ever.
the worst that you can think of. Or let's just say, like, we're doing it and we figure out it's like, oh, Mother Teresa. I think the bloom's off that rose. Actually, like,
yeah,
maybe somebody great. Gandhi.
Yeah.
All right, like that you find out that you're Gandhi's, kid or whatever. Although that would be very weird. I or like great grandson or whatever. Would that change? Like finding that information now, especially like you're a formed adult in your 40s and all that. Would that change how you think about yourself or anything? Like, would you go through a traumatic reawakening of any sort of
I've got a
with
headline
that
for you.
information?
I've got a headline for you. From businessinsider.com, October 7th, 2018. The headline is, "We tracked down one of Hitler's last living family members on Long Island and found out he likes Merkel and dislikes Trump."
Right. Okay.
So I don't know if that answers your question. It seems like a good person.
Well, I mean, to Crofton's question, like for me, I'm like, I do not think I would care at all. Because sort of similarly to, like, look, yeah, you pick someone like Adolf Hitler. He's the worst person everyone can imagine, but you have no idea what any of your ancestors were like. And you know what? I got news for everyone. You guys and everyone else listening, you got some big a-holes in your ancestry for sure.
Yeah,
Everybody does.
I mean, I don't even have to go that far back for that one.
Yeah.
Like,
you can go back pretty good. Yeah, but that's the point. Like, so it's like for sure. Like, you have, like, I mean, again, to be like, what horrible things might your ancestors have done? It's like, in some ways, I'll be like, I'll take some solace and be like, oh, I'm like, because if you're a white person in the Americas, you can often have a chance like, oh, one of your ancestors might have been a slave owner, like horrible person who thought it was great to own other people. And I'm kind of like, I'll be like, oh, the Irish always got shat on. and I'm like, Ukraine, I'm like, I don't think they're known for their world conquest, more getting killed by Russians over and over again. So I'm like, maybe I don't have to bear that burden of having that, but I'm like, who knows? Like, right. Cause I'm like, I might have a bit of British in there somewhere. And it's like, they were the worst, So it's like, do I have some ancestor way back when it was like, oh yeah, slavery is the best thing since sliced bread? You might. And I was like, do you have to bear that cross because you had a big dickhead?
Well, I have
somewhere
that,
back
though.
in your. Well, exactly. But I think the question. The answer to Crofton's question for me is like, no. And if one of those people was an amazing person, I'm like, well, great, good for them. We all have to forge our own path, and live our own lives and be our own people. Yeah, okay. And I feel bad for anyone who feels this weight of what someone else did, on them.
I do, and I can tell you about it. And I don't mind sharing it on the show. It's interesting. My grandfather, I said he escaped Hungary. I think it was around the 1950s or 60s, Russian occupation. What happened before World War II? Who did Hungary fight for? They were occupied by Germany, and they were an Axis of military force. So my grandfather on my mom's side fought for the Germans. He was Axis.
What, in World War One?
In World War II.
Oh, in World War II.
Yeah, the bad one. And and you know what? And you know what else? Like, my aunt gave it to me. I don't know if she's read it or not. She didn't want it. But my grandfather wrote a memoir of his life. It's sitting here. in Hungarian. I just have to translate it, but I have ADHD and I keep meaning to and not doing
Oh,
it.
you haven't translated a tome of Hungarian? Whoa, get your act together. I would never do that, Bo.
It's something
Give
I've really
yourself a
wanted.
break.
It's something I've really wanted to do because I'm curious. Like, if there's, I don't know what the story is. No one will tell me, and I have just to translate it to find out what's in there. I don't know if it's bullshit or if it's actually something pretty awesome or just mine. I don't know. I should actually do it now that I say it. But
I would laugh if it's like I buried the treasure beneath the tree next to my gravestone.
It was a book for publication.
The gold is there. To my relatives, please.
Remember
like,
those ancestors?
So
we
long?
have all the royal jewels that are worth billions.
We looted so many houses.
I'd be so mad. I better go translate it now. But the point being that they don't talk about it, so I don't know the information. They kept the war. Once they never really were on the German side. They were occupied and drafted and brought up as teenagers to fight in the war and all that shit. So, that's all they knew. But he was on that side, and
so were millions of people.
I know, but I'm just saying, I don't, you don't have to tell me that. I have no association with it, so that's
doesn't matter
exactly
much
right. But I literally have it. I could go around advertising, hey, my grandfather fought for the Germans? He was awesome. And, people would not like me saying shit like that. And I don't even like saying that. But you know what I mean? But I don't carry it with me. It's got nothing to do with me. And my family, to their credit, once they came to Canada, they were business owners. They worked hard. They were contributing members to society and all that shit. But
Bo digs up the treasure. It's like he pulls out the coins. It's clear after very quick examination and the note left in the bag that the treasure was stolen from Hungarian peasants by his grandfather. I stole and looted all their houses. I've gathered all this money. And Bo's like, oh, I really should give this back. But it has been a few generations. It's a lot of gold. I could get a lot of podcasts going and do it a lot of good.
I'm poor. There's no treasure.
He hasn't had the book translated yet. Nobody knows. There might be a treasure.
Yeah. So, Crofton, would you be if it was you found out some horrible person or what?
I think it would be the thing that would. If it was a horrible person, I think that I would be all right with moving past it, being like, I'm my own person. I've made my own choices and stuff like that. I think where I would have a harder time is if it was somebody who had done something extremely impressive and I felt like I was squandering some sort of legacy. And I think that that's where the guilt gets thrown on by by family. We have a legacy of this or an ancestry of this. But if say all my family or generations had fought in some sort of freedom fighter movement or whatever, and then I didn't even know anything about said movement or whatever, I would probably feel pretty shitty about that. And so yeah, I mean, it would change. I would want to know more if there was a dramatic revelation. I think that for me, I've just, my feeling is that I'm not so curious as to go out and do my family tree myself. And as you say, Mike, as you go back generation to generation, well, then there's just more and more people, in which case, it dilutes everything and makes less of a personal connection to me. And so for me, it's been my grandparents, I've kind of, and I didn't even know my grandparents that well. I've kind of sort of stopped there. I don't really even know much about my great-grandparents. I found out the other day, I was at my mom's or something, I forget, and I guess one of my relatives was the lieutenant general of Ontario or Quebec or some shit, which is the equivalent of the governor general for a province. And I have a relative that was the lieutenant general, and I was like, oh yeah, that's interesting.
Lieutenant governor?
So, would you have anyone
lieutenant governor, excuse me.
Maybe anyone who slaughtered First Nations by
you'll learn about that lieutenant governor. He's like some horrible statements of These
No.
schools we'll train the native out of them. And Grafton's like, ooh, yeah, I'm not so proud of
that
him
does not
anymore.
hold up. No, but see, I wasn't like, oh, it was interesting in that he occupied a position, a notable position or whatever. But it was not like anything that made me want to figure out more. And maybe that speaks to a lack of curiosity on my side, or it just speaks to the fact that I don't, like I'm moving forward and I'm not necessarily thinking too much about what's behind me. And I mean, but I can appreciate those who do, especially those who are like building on top of the footsteps of others. And like we were talking about, like the Black Lives Matter movement recently in the States, they're building on the backs of the civil rights movement. And you have people like John Lewis, who recently passed, or Barack Obama was talking about how you the next generation are the future and are building on what we did before and all that. It makes it more impactful. It adds more oomph to it, and it makes that connected tissues that you're part of this greater story, helping your ancestors reach freedom and all of that. And the romantic in me really appreciates that. But then at the same point, I'm also able to see, like, we are all our own people, and we're all able to forge our own path. So it is that balance. I guess because I recognize we're probably going to roll into verdict soon, what I don't understand about the topic, and I still don't really, is like, when we're talking about ancestry is a good, bad, or bullshit thing, are we talking about like the studying of ancestry, like of trying
No,
to
that's genealogy, right?
genealogy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, different topic, Crofton.
Well,
No,
no,
but
no, he's right. It's the same topic,
I'm trying
but I mean, to your point, like, yeah, I wouldn't say genealogy. Like, if someone wants to study this stuff, like, I don't know, I'm not. I have no opinion on that for this.
So
for the
but when you
purposes of this conversation.
I echo Crofton's inquiry though, because I'm like, ancestry just seems like to be a matter of fact. So like,
yeah, it's like we have ancestors.
But I guess it's more like does it? Yeah, like does it matter? Is it important? Like, and if it is, then it's good. And
is there a different?
I'm
word
kind of
for
thinking
that?
of it like that.
Is there a different word for that? Just
than
when I labeled
ancestry?
the show, with the right term.
I still think ancestry is the right thing.
Hey, we've talked for like an hour about ancestry. That's what the show's got to be called.
And it's like, but just think, but when you go, I mean, I guess
yeah, maybe we should title the show.
is
We should pick the topic after the conversation.
genealogy. No, but I mean,
it's not genealogy. I think what you mean.
Well, no, genealogy is a study of your personal ancestry and like family tree stuff.
Genealogy.
No, it should be ancestry, because it's like, I mean, part of the other things that I heard about, I don't know if you guys had heard, like, essentially, unless you're of African descent, you have something like 4% Neanderthal DNA,
okay,
which is kind of interesting. That's ancestry. You're like, does that matter? I don't know. Who cares? It's kind of my view. But some people might be like, no, it does. It does matter.
Scientifically, it might matter. Like, isn't knowing better than being like, I don't know?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. Does it matter? But I guess the other thing about why this, okay, I talk about pop culture. This is the last thing I wanted to mention that had just occurred to me. There's a lot of this stuff in fiction, right? In fiction, you'll often be like, oh, you're a descendant of a great king, or some special character has this, like, they're like the ancestry that they hold makes them this special one who's worthy of having a narrative written about them. There's a lot of that, and oftentimes I'm like, it's unfortunate because it's like, in stories, it's either like, oh, you're special because you had a great ancestry of these like special people from the past, and if your ancestors were just a bunch of like bucktooth blacksmiths who lived under the thumb of some local baron and didn't do shit, and you're like, that's it for 1,000 years, like, that sucks. Doesn't mean you can't do something in your life.
The sophistication of storytelling is not, today is much better than it was when, folk
I just mean there is a lot of that stuff around.
Yeah, for sure. Even now, but nowadays you can find all kinds of the depressing, shitty version of life that you're describing, where everyone, like,
they all end up on Tatooine anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if you want, I can do my verdict first, and maybe it'll help you frame how you give your verdict.
Okay, I guess it's decided. All right, but it is verdict time, so I'm going to roll into the animals now. Let's do it. Oh, wait, before it starts, I wanted to say one thing, because Crimson Neon had a really cool comment that I think deserves imprinting on the record, which is that he says, My great-great-grandfather got caught banging the mistress of a local mafia guy in Milan. He thought it prudent to run like hell. I'm fourth generation New Jersey Italian Irish American. So it's just funny to have ancestry like someone.
Yeah,
was
like I
banging
mean that's the
mob boss's wife. Like
it's the family story, right? Like what, like
Yeah.
and that stuff is interesting. But does it affect your day to day? He's like, oh, I have to be a philanderer now too, and try to like sleep with married
No,
women. It's in my genes.
It's just a fun story.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
exactly.
We have the oral
exactly,
tradition, and it's fun to know, and there's meaning. Anyways, we'll get to verdicts.
Actually, it sounds more like Martin Scorsese.
I'm starting
visual
verdicts.
edition.
It's gone.
All right.
Order, I said. Order in the court.
All right, court is now in session. The judge, Michael, has decided to go first.
Presiding. Ancestry. Where are your roots? Does it matter? Is it a good thing to think and cherish these things? Is it bad? Is it detrimental to get hung up on these things that you have not that much relation to? I think that's how I frame the like good. There's value, helps identify you, helps give you your identity. Bad, it's a yoke you wear, you know. So for me, I'll just go and say my verdict, which is that ancestry is bullshit. Big pile of bullshit. And I think I choose the smelly bullshit category because I think it's kind of it's like a lot of things like I don't think it really matters in the sense some of the stuff we said, you know, you are your own person, you make your own decisions. If you had a great ancestor who was wise and wonderful, whatever, you can still be a tool. Vice versa, you're related to Hitler doesn't mean you're a bad person. You got to make your own way, and having that stuff on you, you know, it doesn't matter. If you're interested in it, people who study genealogy, they like it. They like the stories, like our friend about his ancestor banging the mafia. Interesting stories. You like it as a hobby. I'm like, I got no, you know, whatever. But I don't think it matters. It doesn't affect you. I feel bad for anyone who puts weight on themselves. It's like, oh, I bear this burden or this legacy I must uphold. It's like, forge your own path, be your own person. You're not, you know, I don't think you have to be beholden to these people that you never met, that you don't know, wouldn't recognize them on the street, and frankly have as much genetic similarities as random people you might see around you as you do to someone 8 generations back. Like, you're just barely related to that person. So for that reasons, I think the whole thing is bullshit, and it does create some divisions, but it's not all negative. There's some good stuff to come out of it too.
All right. I went last week, so Crofton, you can close up. Sound good? Yeah. All right. So, yeah, my verdict is going to be this. I think the stories and meaning that come from knowing your ancestry is fun, is good. And I think you can choose. There's like a spectrum of how much meaning you want to give to it. I agree with Michael that in many cases it's of no real practical value and causes more problems than it solves. You know, once you're in a membership of a group and you're there, then you don't need to hold on to the tenets of the past. It's just, you know, we are who we are. Like, I think who we are is formed very, very early on in our lives. And I think as we get older, it gets very hard to change. And so when you have transplants and people, especially in a place like this where people move about, some of those people hold on to that quite a bit. Even, you know, the mafia example is a good thing. Like, it matters so much to be an Italian in a place where it doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter that you're Italian. But that's how they know you obey the same code and ethics and of that particular cultural group that has transplant history from somewhere else. And I think that's what Mike's driving at, where that stuff's bad for civilization overall. And I agree, when we finally get to the hive mind, things like where we're from and ancestry is not going to matter, because we're going to see each other for who we really are and not this surface meat package that we wear on our brains, because we really are just our brains, and we're driving around this vehicle. And when we talk about ancestry, we're just talking about, you know, the last model of Ford. You know, like, are you like, oh man, that last model of Tesla, ooh, they were that, and I was this model of Tesla. Like, imagine cars talking about their ancestry and design iterations, right? Like, that's what we're doing. Car doesn't matter that much. It's who's inside matters. And so I think I'll leave it at that and say overall, Ancestry is a good thing.
I will say, I will say that I don't see really how you can say it's a bad thing. I'll start with that. It's tricky. It is, ancestry exists. We all have ancestors, and it's just a matter of the value that we put in them. And I think Bo makes good points, particularly related to the sort of the romantic nature, storytelling nature of your ancestors and such. Mike made a good point about separating overall history with your own sort of personal history, and just because you're not part of an ethnic group or whatever, or a certain tradition, doesn't mean that you can't or shouldn't learn about that group struggles, traditions, and that sort of thing. I will say, as somebody that has not experienced significant hardship or struggle in my life outside of like family health stuff, but like with regards to oppression or anything like that, and in my direct, my parents and my grandparents, it makes me feel sort of bad, taking a negative bent on this topic, because I just feel that, like, if you asked like a First Nations person about what ancestry and tradition and all of that means to them, it would be tremendously important, and just because it's not for me doesn't mean it's not for other people, but for me personally, that's all I can speak to, and it's never been something that I've given much attention to, much thought to. I don't put much stock in it. I worry about tribalism, and when you see stuff going on in the States, even stuff like with regards to those Confederate statues and the idea of, like, the South and the North, and that wasn't that long ago, and people are talking about, oh, my ancestors, and my ancestors did this, or my ancestors did that. And I just think that in the interest of moving forward, it can be more of an anchor than it can be, a teaching tool that pushes you forward. And so I skew a bit negative towards it, but not wholly negative in the way that I would say that it's completely bad. I just think that, like, it's good to know your personal stories and your family stories and all of that, but you don't want to be burdened by them. I agree with a lot of what Mike was saying this episode, and I am going to say ancestry is bullshit. Bullshit.
Feel like we were pretty on brand with those three.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I'd have to check.
I wanted to say bullshit, and I found a way to make it good.
I'd have to check my ancestor verdicts, like of.
Yeah. Did you get your verdict from your mom's side or your dad's side?
I definitely got it from the side that always says bullshit.
I don't know which side that is. But
It is
sides.
It is funny. My dad has this giant book it's the Hodgins book. I don't know who put it together, but it's like it is a big.
Oh, you have a family book too, eh?
Yeah. And he was like, "Oh, you got to read through the Hodgins book." And I remember when we were having a kid, I was flipping through it to be like, oh, maybe there's names in here, trying to find a name for your kid. I'm like, oh, I don't know. And actually, it was one of my great uncles, but I knew him. He's Ivan. My son is Ivan, so that came from the family. But what the funny thing is, so I've reading through this book, and there was a guy called this is about, I don't know, 3 or 4 generations back. So of like and I don't think I'm a direct descendant of him, but he was called Richard. He went by Dick, and I guess he was a large man. And in the book, it said Big Dick Hodgins. Like that's
his name.
That's what his name was written. Big Dick Hodgins. I'm like, oh yeah, hey everybody, I'm directly descended from Big Dick Hodgins. You know him, everybody.
Fuck, man, you should put that on your Twitter.
I saw it, I was
you should take a picture of that and make a Twitter profile. And see
I shouldn't be like this. This is my family history. Everyone, read it and weep. But
I just think like Mike's father's name is Richard, goes by Dick, had a company which we've talked about in the past.
No one made that connection.
as Dick, it was a company for new listeners that did interlocking stone and other work, and he called it Dick of all trades. If Big Dick Hodgins was still around, he could have had that company and called it Big Dick of all trades.
They're like, why is it big? They're like, because I'm big guy.
I'm Big Dick.
I'm Big Dick.
That's Mike's ancestry.
What makes it funny is they weren't thinking about big penises.
No
one was. Just a name to them. They were like, it's like saying
fella.
Big Crofton Steers.
Yeah.
Big
Wait,
Michael
you were
Hodgins.
thinking about big penises?
Okay, you were listening. And so, speaking of not listening, if you want to write us an email, because you did happen to listen and feel like you want to respond or throw your 2 cents in like Crimson Neon did in the chat room here, you can do that. Please send us an email at goodbadbull@gmail.com. And someone did write us an email, after a few weeks of being kind of dry.
What?
One of our favorite listeners, Lennart.
Leonard.
All right, maybe I shouldn't say last name. I'll try. Oh, shit.
I think you kind of mumbled over it. We were too.
I didn't even hear.
I definitely butchered it, but
it's good to hear from Leonard again.
Yeah,
long time listener. Eh?
Yeah.
Oopsies. I think I got to try and bleep that out, anyways, in the other thing. But
you give his address and
Leonard could be the most common name in Norway.
I fucked up. All right. Anyways, let's move on. Hello. I always enjoy your podcasts. You manage to discuss subjects in ways that I find interesting, funny, sometimes irritating. Yeah.
Well, hey, good.
It's pretty mostly Mike and Crofton, right? But always enjoyable. The latest podcast, GBB 247, was excellent. It was perhaps one of the most serious podcasts you have done, but I enjoyed it very much. The subject stress is an interesting subject that can be discussed in a lot of ways. The way you chose was interesting. Gentlemen, keep up your excellent work. Leonard.
Oh, man, that makes me feel so good.
That was an awesome email, Leonard. Thank you so much for that feedback, because, that little bit of inspiration goes a long way. It's really nice to hear someone who listens, who enjoyed it, and that we put something out into the world that actually, was of value to someone,
and that we can still irritate him sometimes.
I like that inclusion. It's I really like this. Sometimes annoying, but very good.
Well, if you're having any kind of conversation where it comes at a lot of different angles, which we often bring, it's going to rub someone the wrong way, and that as it should. This is about dialogue. So I'm glad to hear that.
And let's give a shout out to Wicked Kitten 13 in the chat room, who also contributed great things to the show, but we I only picked one to read. If I read too many comments from Twitch chat, Michael will get mad at me.
Yeah, done.
So I used up all my currency today on Crimson. All right. Anyways, moving along.
Write us an email, Monica. Write us an email.
Yes, you want your name? Write us an email with your name all over it. I will read it, unless it's absolutely ridiculous. Don't make me read dumb things.
Bo's nothing if not classy.
Yeah. So I just mean dumb things like, Bo is an idiot or something, like Bo's super stupid. Like, I'm not going to read that.
I got to delete my draft.
That's what I mean. Anyways, don't let me tell you how to write an email, but if you want it read, just don't say stuff like that, I guess. All right. I'm rabbit holing. So, listeners, you can be like Leonard and send us a sweet email at goodbadbull@gmail.com. You can find our show at goodbadbull.com. So if you happen to stumble on this and you just got here, just go there. You'll find out all the shit you need to know about the show there. And if you like the show and you're thinking, I've got an extra couple bucks, why don't I toss these boys some money? You can do so. We have a site, or we have a Patreon page where you can help support the show. It goes towards server costs and for Crofton's trips to the Bahamas, as you can see here on his webcam. So yes, please buy us a cup of coffee. Do that at patreon.com/goodbadbull. Lastly, we're not as big on the socials these days, but we're still going to give them out. You can find more about what I'm doing at boschwartz.com. If you want to find out more about what Michael's up to, Mike, where can they find you?
Nowhere, not on the things. So just
where can they find your ancestors?
It's all over the world, man. All over the world.
All right. And Crofton, where can our wonderful listeners find out more about what you're doing?
They can follow me on my new Twitter account at Big Dick Hodgins. But,
That's totally taken.
That's
That's
my
taken.
ancestor. You can't use that.
Whatever.
You're not related to Big Dick Hodgins. I am.
Wait, I swear.
There's probably
there's
like
a big Dick Hodgins there for sure.
No, there's probably, but Crofton, it's probably like we pee steers or something like that. There's probably one of those way back in the way.
Yep.
Be like, no, I'm not related to him.
There is a big Dick Hodgins. He has 70 following and 0 followers. He's Lee Henry, and he's never tweeted before.
Oh, interesting. I was very curious as to what his bio was going to be, but
No bio.
and his avatar picture is just a penis.
Let's see who he's following though. BBC Breaking News.
Hey, rabbit hole.
While you're rabbit holing, I will say that you can follow me on Twitter at Crofton Steers. I also do another podcast, Dungeons and Diapers, and you can follow that TGI studios.com/DAD. And the other thing I'd say is that Bo's mentioned that the Twitch. If you follow us at Good Bad Bull, which is our podcast Twitter, it'll let you know when we go live, which we tend to do at the fairly last minute, notify people or whatever. But it would allow you to participate in the chat and stuff like that.
The theory is it will help you get you addicted because it's variable reward. If you knew when it was, you wouldn't get addicted.
I see.
Spontaneity is the spice of life.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Well, I guess that concludes the show. I think this one was pretty good. I think we had I expected this to be a funnier show, but we seem to have a serious conversation.
You know what? That sounds like something a Hungarian would say.
Yeah. Whoa. He's a member of the Axis.
All right. We're gonna go down a bad hole here because I have in the past, like when you have friends like Fufu, he's friend from the past, like he'd call me a dirty Nazi and he called me a Nazi and I'd call him a dirty leb, and that shit was cool in that context, but saying that stuff out loud for people who just don't know the context or the comfortability, it's like I don't know. So like as soon as you're like screw you Hungarian, I almost called you the M word, and I'm like let's not do
Mongolian?
No, for Irish.
I would not even care. I'd be like, what?
Like,
I'm not Irish.
Yeah, but
what the hell do I know about Ireland?
This is going out to the public. I don't want a cavalcade of me letting off racial epithets.
What is the M word?
A
Sorry?
Mick.
Is that
yeah?
Is that a bad one?
Yeah.
Hey,
I guess so.
You know what's funny though is Bo's already given me at least 4 clips that I can use out of context on social media.
That's what social media is all about.
I'm like,
embarrassing your friends.
Look at this big racist Bo Schwartz.
Yeah. Yeah. And now he's got to end the show.
Yeah, end the show.
What? We didn't do anything funny. I got to end it now?
Yeah.
Well, we did do something funny. It was at my expense, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.